As we continue this study on overcoming emotions that destroy, I want to tell you two really quick stories. And when I get done, you'll really know why I told them to you. This will come as a complete shock to those who really know me. I was a very ornery little kid, hyperactive and all the rest. And I'll never forget, I was 10 or 11 years old, and myself and my sisters, we went to visit Grandma. She lives in West Virginia in sort of a rural area. And there was a nice house, and then there was some fences, and then about 600 yards of a 45-degree, really steep hill that went up. And we got to Grandma's, and she said, now, Chip, you know, in the back where it's all fenced in, a friend has brought his horse. It's very dangerous, has not been ridden for years, and stay away from that horse. It's very big. Some people have gotten hurt, and no one rides it. Well, I knew right then what I was going to do. And so I got my sisters hooked in on this, and so my one sister started, we got it to eat a little bit, and then I found a saddle. I could hardly hold it, and I've never seen one, but I was into the cowboys when I was growing up. So I just, bum-ba-da-bum-ba-da-bum-ba-da-bum-ba-da-bum. Some of you know that song. Others are thinking, what's that got to do? So I get the saddle on, and I don't know, but I just, you figure you just keep pulling on stuff and buckling stuff, and it looked pretty close. I was afraid to put the bit in, so I just put a rope around his neck. And so then they keep feeding him, and I got him next to the fence, and then I got on him. It was a huge horse. And I got on him, and he went like this. And then, he just sprinted up that. Dead run, vroom, 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 vroom. And I'm holding onto the rope and onto the horn like, this is awesome. This is like, oh my gosh, this is just like on TV. This is great, this is great. He gets all the way to the top. And then he turned around. You got it. He comes down as fast, and he starts tripping. And I'm thinking, I see the fence. I'm about halfway down. If I jump off, I'm going to get hurt. If we hit that fence, I'm going to die. So I jump off, and roll a few times, and it kind of hurts. And then that horse turns around and starts chasing me. And so I run, and I dive under the fence. My sister tries to help me, and she gets a little nip in the rear end. That horse was dangerous. Looking back, it sure was fun and pretty stupid. Fast forward many years, it was when I lived in Texas, pastored a church there, and a friend named Alan, and Alan said, do you like horses? Well, yeah, I think. I don't know much about him. He goes, well, these are these quarter horses. They're super well trained. I think you would really enjoy it. So I go out to this ranch, and, it's Texas, and these are these huge horses that, kind of on their own can tell little calves where to go. And so I get on the horse, and he goes, now, let me give you some instructions. If you make this sound, the horse will back up. I said, get out. No, he said, try it. So I make the sound. He backs up. If you make this sound, he'll do that. If you just lean in with this knee, he'll do this. If you lean in with this knee. If you put the rein on his neck, he does this. If you just barely do this, it was like driving a car. I look like a genius. He's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Right? Now, here's the point. Two huge, powerful, wild stallions. One, out of control, deadly. The other, after time, a bit in its mouth, under control and training, was unbelievable. Here's what you need to get. That's the word picture. That's your anger. That's my anger. It is a wild stallion. It's an emotion that has huge potential for negative and huge potential for positive. But you got to get a bridle in it, and you got to control it. And if you don't, it can ruin relationships. It can ruin your soul. Terrible things happen when emotions are out of control. So what I want to do now, we've been talking about this. We know that it's a secondary emotion, right? We know it's just the red light on the dashboard of your soul. Anger is never the problem. Anger says there's something wrong under the hood. We know that some of us spew, some of us leak, some of us stuff it. And in our last times together, I said, I'm going to give you a journey and a process and a way to turn anger from a foe into a friend, that horse instead of this one. So with that, you'll notice in your notes, I think we're in session number 5. There's the ABCs of anger. This is a process about how do you actually go about taming the wild stallion of anger. A is for acknowledge, admit and accept the anger. You know, it's amazing. Some of us believe anger is wrong, especially if you're a stuffer. But it can't be like, well, I'm a little upset or I'm a little frustrated. How's this? I'm mad. I'm really ticked off. That was totally inexcusable. I should have been promoted. That other person was promoted. I can't believe it. He dumped me with a text. Are you kidding me? That person who cut in front of us, this is ridiculous. They owed us this money and they didn't say anything and they moved out of town, right? Those kids are being trafficked in the Philippines. That's wrong. You just got to admit first that you're angry. That's A. B, backtrack. Backtrack to the first emotion. What really is behind it? Is it, I felt betrayed, I'm disappointed, I'm lonely, it was unfair, I was let down, I was forgotten, I was attacked, I was persecuted, I was humiliated in front of everyone. And so what you want to do is you got to backtrack to what's really going on. And that's a journey and a process, and you learn it. And then C, you consider the cause. And we learned that it could be you're hurt, there's unmet needs. You have a rightful need to be respected, to be loved, to be cared about. And when you're not, an unmet need, you get angry. Sometimes it's an unmet expectation. Plans changed. You've worked all this time. The wedding was supposed to be here. It's pouring down rain. You're mad. It's an outdoor wedding. Someone was supposed to meet you. They said they'd show up. They didn't show up. Or maybe it's just personal attack, just our insecurities when sometimes it's a word or sometimes it's physical and we feel threatened. So you go back and say, okay, I'm angry. I think this is the real emotion. I think this is the cause. And then the D is determine how to best deal with it. So before I go on, this isn't, hypothetical. I want you to lean back, shut your eyes if nothing weird is going to happen. And I want you to actually just in your mind's eye think, when this week was I angry? And if you're thinking, I wasn't angry all week, then you need to go listen to the other two services. When this week did I get angry, even a little bit? Okay? Then what was behind it? Just try and think. What was behind it? What did I really feel? And then maybe what was the cause? Was I hurt? Was I threatened? Was it just my expectations and their expectations? And then what did you do? I just want you to process. Are you ready? It's really interesting. After the services, I get to talk with people, and it's just like, oh my. One guy said, I'm sort of in charge, and a bunch of us are moving from out of state, and they're my roommates. And I said, there's a lot of opportunities for anger, isn't there? Everything from, hey, you ate my food in the refrigerator, to, I said, wait till you get married. A lot more possibilities. Anyone that goes to work, anyone that drives in this traffic, there's chances to get angry all the time. The question is, are you going to use it and manage it for good, or is it going to do negative things to you? I have learned, whatever I'm teaching on, God has this, I think it's part sense of humor and part just reality, is I get tested or I get to keep learning. So last Sunday, did the 3 services. I was a little bit tired. I get a call from my oldest son. He's very kind. He calls almost, every Sunday. We connect every week. And we're talking a little bit. We're having this great conversation. He goes, hey, Dad, we're going out of town, the whole family, next Thursday. And it's Mom's birthday on Wednesday. And, my day, I start early and go till late on Monday. So the only night is Tuesday. We would like to drive over and take you and Mom out to eat for her birthday. My immediate response is anger. You're looking at me like, why? Because for months we have planned, we're going to Carmel for her birthday. Just her and me. Romantic weekend. Okay? We're leaving Tuesday about noon. And my reaction is, okay, wait a second. He's trying to express his love for his mom, and I didn't even know, but I don't feel good about this. But I feel between the rock and the hard place. And so I said, well, son, you know what? Thanks so much. That's so thoughtful, but I'm taking your mom to Carmel, and, that's okay, Dad. Instead of driving over here, we'll just drive to Carmel, and we'll have dinner with you that night. I'm thinking, what part of this are you not getting, son? And so I said, well, okay, you ready? I'm aware there's emotions. I'm backtracking and feeling like, oh gosh, there's some grief and some loss and some doesn't make sense. How do you get mad at your son? This is the hardest part of anger. When you're angry with someone and you realize it doesn't make sense. And so wisely, after years of practice, hey, let me get back with you tomorrow. Get 24 hours, thought about it, prayed about it, thought, okay, what's the goal here? I want to express my love to my wife. We want to have a really special time. And I kind of thought about just our whole family life the last 2 or 3 months. And I thought, my son is being extraordinarily sensitive to really affirm his mom. And as I prayed about it, I thought, you know what? Okay, odd thought. I wonder what would be most meaningful to Teresa. just a thought. And as I prayed about it, I said, hey, honey, Eric, said this and said that. And I know the time was for us, but I think it would mean a lot to you. And she just kind of smiled. And they drove down. We had dinner. We had a great time. And the rest was great. I'm telling you, 10 years ago, I probably would have not known that I'm angry. I probably would have had a tone of voice that said, oh, Eric, sorry, man, And he would have felt, even though I don't think I'm intense, people tell me when I'm intense, I don't even know it. And things would have not gone well. A, acknowledge. B, backtrack. C, consider the cause. D, determine. Now let me ask you, how did you handle your anger this last week? What do you do when you get ticked off? Let's walk through then the who, the what, the how, and the when. I'm going to literally walk you through not just some things in general. You say, how do you do that? Are you ready? You acknowledge your anger. Here's step number 1. It's in your notes. You need to ask yourself, who am I angry at? Myself, another person, God, or the situation? In my case, I was mad at the situation. I mean, you can't be mad at your son for loving their mom, my wife. But the situation, it was what unmet expectation. I have this expectation, and they're getting shifted. I did not want to give up that time. Okay. Dr. Becca Johnson and I had a chance to write this book together, and she shares an illustration. That was so powerful. She said I was doing counseling with a young woman who had been date raped, and we were not making any progress. I mean, we were going on for weeks and no progress. I mean, still problems and nightmares and depression, and we had a breakthrough. And the breakthrough was when this girl recognized she wasn't mad at the perpetrator. She was mad at herself. She had reconstituted everything to say, well, maybe I should have seen this, or there was a little red flag here, or why did I ever let him into my apartment, or whatever it was. And the breakthrough came when she could actually own, I'm angry, but I'm angry at me. You can't resolve what happened to you unless you decide what's really going on. And that was the breakthrough. And then she could get the kind of help to say, wait a second, that's totally illogical. You're not the one at fault. And then she processed that. I happen to have a friend a number of years ago who was in mid-40s at the time, attractive, great job, great personality, and single, and mid-40s, and a woman. And I watched, that about every 9 to 12 months, she would have like a complete major meltdown. First, I would notice impatience, and then anger under the surface, and then she'd get depressed. And so I said, hey, honey, do you think you could, meet with this person? I think they're really struggling. And the breakthrough came when she realized she wasn't mad at all these Christian guys that won't make a commitment. She wasn't mad that, circumstances and dates weren't going maybe the way she wanted. What she realized is she was mad at God. She was livid at God. I've followed you. I've walked with you. I've, best I know, done what, and you haven't brought the right person. And when I am obedient to you, I demand that you come through the way I think is best. Well, you know what? No one gets to do that with God. But are you ready? Ask yourself, who are you really mad at? Second, then, is the what. What should you do? Should you express it directly, like confront someone? Use an I feel message? Should you release it indirectly? In other words, boy, this isn't the time or the place, and this could go really negative, so I need to own it and express it, but indirectly. And then here's a question. Right after the last service, there was a family situation, and the person that was talking to me said, wow, when I do this, they explode, and they do this, and they do that, and we're a family, and we're related, and what do you do? And I can't even talk and reject them. And so she said, maybe I'll write a letter and send it to him. I said, well, how do you think that would go? Oh, he'll explode. Here's a question to ask. Will your response make things better or worse? Dr. Johnson, sometimes, I'm a man of many words, but often not of clarity. In 2 or 3 paragraphs, she writes, I think, the best counsel on what to do. Should you address it directly or indirectly? When we find ourselves in unwanted situations with angry feelings, we basically have 2 choices. Do I express my feelings directly to the person, or do I release them indirectly through various activities? Does a situation require concerns to be communicated directly to the person involved, or is it better to redirect anger elsewhere, finding an alternative that's healthy, non-destructive, non-confrontational way to express it? Dealing with it directly means you choose to confront the situation. You're committed to bring about change. We act rather than acquiesce. We take action appropriately to the person involved. We let them know why we're angry, our root emotion, and what contributed to that situation. It's best to express ourselves clearly, listen carefully, without blaming or attacking. In I feel angry when I wish in the future we could. She goes on to say, dealing with our anger indirectly gives us a few more options. Sometimes it's best to accept things the way they are, to literally conform and not share with the person who made you angry that you're angry. Now get this, listen very, very carefully. But it's important to make sure our motivation isn't from an uncomfortable situation. We choose this option not by default or by hopelessness, but out of a calculated conclusion that it would not be best to stir the waters or rock the boat at this particular time and this particular situation. Wisdom, I believe, given by the Holy Spirit, sometimes demands that we choose not to reprove someone when history, how they've always responded, or circumstances, you might lose your job, dictate it's an exercise in futility. Sometimes it's best to walk away. Then notice this. We may have to find a new job, do business with a different company, or discontinue an unhealthy relationship. We choose not to confront, but to quit. We should consider this only after we have weighed all other options carefully and determine letting go is the best course of action. And I would say, there's certain things where you've been down this road, you share something with this person, it's a family member, maybe a supervisor, maybe it's a harassment that is emotional or sexual at work. You've gone through all the things and nothing's going to change. You're going to throw gasoline on the fire and you say, you know what, I'm willing to confront this. And I just talked to someone who this week will be confronting something at their work. And that's one option. Or, you know what, right now in this situation, wisdom says, step away. I'm going to deal with my anger. I'm going to recognize I have it, but I'm not going to confront this person. It's not always right to confront someone. Proverbs chapter 9, Solomon says, do not reprove a mocker, lest he hate you. Reprove a wise man and he'll love you. Give instruction to a wise man or woman and they'll increase their learning. There's some people, as Jesus would say, don't throw your pearls before swine. So it requires discernment. Question. Who are you angry at that you need to ask and answer the question, is this a person that I need to confront? Or is this a person that I need to get my anger out and deal with it in a healthy way? But confronting them will do nothing but make it worse. And the next one then is how. So who am I angry at? What should I do? How do I deal with the situation? Should I do it in person? Do it by the phone? Through a letter? Or, I love these are Becca's words, or engage in a discharge activity. You know, sometimes you're really hacked off, and you know what? If we wanted to, quote, confront people every time a little conversation here, I got an email here, and something happened here, someone in the hallway said this, and you have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these, well, you're not going to sit down every time someone, quote, offends you a bit, but you realize the combination of them, you're just mad inside. For me, that means the elliptical. There's other times where, you know what, you can't confront the person because of maybe some situations that might be dangerous or abusive or seeing them. And there's times where I literally have, God, this is Chip. I am so ticked off. I can't believe, and you know what? There's a lot of Psalms like that. God can handle our anger, but you need to express it. Other times, you need to write it down. A number of years ago, it was our very first church, and I had left, and they were in some sort of a process of searching this and that, and someone that I assumed was my friend gave me a call, and I learned later that he secretly recorded our conversation. And he wanted to record this conversation and say I said certain things, and it got back around to me. Livid would be too mild for how I responded. It was just like, are you kidding me? Right? Betrayal. I mean, I was so mad. And then he didn't share it with anyone. He just said, I've said all these things, and if you want to hear it, listen to this message and all this. And I told people, listen to the message. Anything I said. I was so mad. Some of you know what this is like, right? You've been so hurt, so betrayed, something was so unfair, and you got mad. Literally, you can't sleep at night, right? It's 1:12. You wake up. You're at a stoplight and you're just gazing at a red light and you have anger fantasies of bad things happening to them and you smiling. Or you have these fantasies where you two are talking and everyone finds out what's going on. You go, ha, 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 here's the tape. See what happened? It's the truth, right? Don't you look at me like I'm the only one that's this dysfunctional. We've all done this. But I couldn't get rid of it. This is the how. I couldn't get rid of it. And then I was getting knots in my stomach and indigestion and like, man, I got to go to the doctor. And I realized my anger was not hurting this person. It was killing me. And I sat down. I was living in Santa Cruz at the time, and there was a fellow pastor that was really wise. And, you know, one of the things you got to do is you got to get this out and vet it with someone safe. And I laid it out, and the person said, you know what? Why don't you write a letter to this person? Because it keeps going over and over and over. So write a letter. This is why I'm really angry. This is exactly what you did. This is how it made me feel. And then ask God for the grace to get to the end and say, I want you to know before God, I've forgiven you. So we'll meet for lunch in 2 or 3 days. So we did, and I gave him the letter, and it did. I got it out. I was sleeping again, and he reads these 2 or 3 pages of handwritten letter, and he said, so the goal of this letter is like reconciliation and speaking the truth in love, right? Well, yeah, he goes, there's a lot of inflammatory words and blaming and attacking. I mean, you've done it sort of left-handed. And he says, why don't you try, writing this letter again with no insinuations or blaming. And why don't you just own this is how you felt and why you were angry. And then don't write anything until you feel like the goal is honestly, he's a brother in Christ, right? Yeah. It would really be that you would love him and that you would want to see reconciliation happen. He was like, man, I'm not having lunch with this guy anymore. He's no help at all. And so, I wouldn't do it. It took me 3 or 4 days, and then finally, okay. So I write another letter. I give it back to him, and I'm thinking, and you know what? What's happening? God's changing me. But it's out there. You realize there's people in this room or people watching that you have unresolved anger that you've buried for 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 years, and it's poisoned your soul. And some physical issues you have, and some depression issues you have, and relationship issues you have that remind you of that unconsciously, you're still a prisoner of it. And it will be God's will for some of you to write a letter like this. So he read the letter, looked at me and said, you know what? I got an idea. I'm thinking, I can't take any more of his ideas. Why don't you put this in an envelope and put it in your briefcase for 30 days before you send it? Said, just give God time to work. So I did. And over 30 days, God began to do a number of things. I realized I was really mad and what he did was wrong, and I chose to forgive him. And then I went through that process we'll talk about in our next sessions about how to forgive. But what I realized was what made me angry was my reputation. It wasn't I was just so mad at him, it's that he is projecting that I'm like this, and I've got to protect my record. I don't want anyone to think that about me. And the Holy Spirit whispered, he goes, don't you think I could protect your reputation? Would you be willing to entrust that to me? Hey, Ingram, you're a pastor. This is not going to be the first time that people say things, some of course of which will be true, but things that aren't. And you know something? After 30 days, I didn't need to send it. I kept my briefcase for 2 or 3 years just as a reminder, Lord, I don't have to explain myself and make sure everyone knows, quote, the real story. And it released me.